Today we're going to be factoring polynomials of the form x² plus bx plus c. And I'm going to show you some little tricks to doing this. We're going to start with this first problem, x² plus 15x plus 36. And we're going to set up two sets of parentheses and put x's at the front of each set. And what we're looking for basically are two numbers that multiply to give you your last term, but those same two numbers must add to give you the coefficient of your middle term. So we need two numbers that multiply to give us 36, but add together to give 15. So let's think about that. Well, I'm thinking 12 times 3 is 36, and 12 plus 3 is 15. So that would meet our qualifications. So let's put in plus 12 and plus 3. Now, if you just want to check this to verify, you might say, wait a minute, how did that ever work out? Well, let's try it and see. If we actually FOIL this or use the distributive property repeatedly, let's see if we do get our original polynomial back. X times x gives us x². X times 3 gives us 3x, 12 times x is 12x, and 12 times 3 is 36. Add together our like terms, so we get x² plus 15x plus 36, and indeed it does check out. And I'm going to leave the others for you to check as we proceed through today's lesson. Let's try this next one. We have x² plus 6x plus 15. So we're going to set up our two sets of parentheses. We want to factor it. We need two numbers that multiply to give us 5, but add to give us 6. So those numbers would be 5 and 1. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 plus 1 is indeed 6. So let's fill in those numbers. And they're both positive, so we will use addition signs. So we have a plus 5 and a plus 1. And it does not matter which order you write them in. You can also write them as x plus 1 times x plus 5. That will also work. So now let's do this next one. x² plus 6x plus 9. Two numbers that multiply to give us 9 and add to give us 6. Well, 3 times 3 is 9. And 3 plus 3 gives us 6. So let's use plus 3 and plus 3. Okay, they're both positive. Now we're going to get into some ones where the signs may be a little different here. So we have x² minus 8x plus 15, and we want to factor it. So we're going to set up our two parentheses. Again, we need two numbers that multiply to give us positive 15, but add to give us negative 8. Excuse me. Now, so basically, we're going to need two numbers that are both negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive, and if we add two negatives together, we get a negative. So let's see what we can come up with. Negative 5 times negative 3 gives us positive 15. And negative 5 plus negative 3 does give us negative 8. So that seems to work. So instead of using addition symbols like before, because these are both negative, we're going to use minus symbols. So we're going to have minus 5 and minus 3. And again, they can go in either order. Now let's move down here to the bottom of the page. We have x² plus x minus 20. So let's set up our two sets of parentheses. Remember, it's like having a 1 in front of the x in this problem. We'll fill in our x's. We need two numbers that multiply to give us negative 20, but add to give us positive 1. Now, one of our numbers will have to be positive and one will have to be negative. Since we're adding to get a positive, the bigger number will have to be positive. So let's see what we can come up with. Let's try maybe 5 times negative 4. Let's see if that works. 5 times negative 4 does give us negative 20, and 5 plus negative 4 does does indeed give us positive 1, so we are going to use positive 5 and negative 4. And there is our factored form. Now let's go on to our next page and try some more. We have x squared minus 3x minus 18. So let's set up our two sets of parentheses. Again, we need two numbers that multiply to give us negative 18 and add to give us negative 3. So again, we're going to have one number positive, one number negative. So when we multiply, we get a negative number. Actually, the one with the bigger absolute value is the one that's going to be negative in this case. So let's see what we can come up with. Negative 6 times 3 gives you negative 18. And negative 6 plus 3 gives you negative 3. So let's go ahead and put those in. We have a minus 6 and a plus 3. And there you have it. So x minus 6 and x plus 3. Let's go on to the next problem. We have x squared minus 5x plus 6. Set up our two sets of parentheses. We need two numbers that multiply to give us positive 6, but add to give us negative 5. So we are going to need two numbers that are negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So let's try. Negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. Negative 3 plus negative 2 is negative 5. So those indeed worked out. So we have x minus 3 and x minus 2. Let's move on. So we have x squared plus 2x minus 15. Put in our x's. We need two numbers that multiply to give us negative 15, but add to give us positive 2. So one will have to be positive, one will have to be negative. The bigger of the two numbers will be positive because, or I should say the one with the bigger absolute value, because our middle term is going to have to be positive when we add them together. So let's try this out. Let's try positive 5 times negative 3. That does give you negative 15. And positive 5 plus negative 3 does give you positive 2. So let's plug our numbers in. And again, it doesn't matter which order they go. We have a minus 3 and a positive 5. So x minus 3 times x plus 5. And our last problem here, let's set up our two sets of parentheses. We need two numbers that multiply to give us negative 20, but add to give us negative 8. So, I've already set up my parentheses. So keep in mind, since the 20 is negative, we are going to need one number positive and one number negative. The one with the bigger absolute value is going to have to be negative so that we can get the negative 8 as our middle term. So let's try some numbers. How about negative 10 times positive 2? That does indeed give you negative 20. And negative 10 plus 2 does indeed give you negative 8. So we've chosen the right numbers. So we have negative 10 and positive 2. They can go in either order. Just a word of advice, as you're working these out, if you don't get the right combination of numbers the first time, don't get discouraged. It takes practice. So, I mean, you might have started this problem out trying negative 5 and positive 4 and realized that they did multiply to give you negative 20, but they did not add to give you your middle term. Just keep trying other combinations of numbers. And that it's to be expected that it'll take a little time to begin with before you get used to it. But I know you'll do fine. Thank you very much for joining me.